Hi everyone. This week, after a couple of devlogs of just like planning out abilities on spreadsheets and all that, this week I've decided to put in a new mechanic, a functional element that I needed to implement some of the abilities that I wanted to introduce, and also just needed to be a gameplay mechanic. So if I go here, we have a new option on our player control panel, and that's to switch. So I've put in a couple of extra party members in the backup. Now the main party is not full up with 4, but I put in I called it a rogue. I gave it some abilities. But you can now switch your party members mid-combat. Now, before I switch to rogue, I got to explain, I gave the rogue also a passive ability that would allow it to switch in without penalty. So when I switch it out for the healer, you see that the rogue is here and nothing has happened to it. But if I switch back, normally there is a penalty to switching. When I switch back to the healer, its turn has been used, but I have a passive ability implemented that would allow you to switch in without a penalty, and that I think fits like a roguish character, just being able to quickly get into a battle. I think the plan was to slap that ability on the assassin class and maybe a couple others. So that's there. And just to show the whole function of it, I don't currently have anything preventing the protagonist from being switched out, but that may be that you have to keep them in your party. Let's say I switch, got to do a couple switches until they're all used. There's also a check that when they're all done, it ends your turn. So that's very important. I might have another ability that if you switch out without a penalty, so like the ability was the rogues. The rogue switches in without a penalty, but maybe there could be an ability where it's like more of an escape ability where if they switched out with somebody else, then the person who comes in doesn't have that penalty. I'm not sure if that could possibly create like an endless cycle. I don't think so, because if you're just switching and you're not doing anything and then you use the action and using your action actually ends your turn, then I think it'll be fine. I want to be careful of not introducing any endless loops that can be broken. But yeah, that's the main thing that I've been working on for the past few weeks, but I've also been implementing abilities as I go along. That like surprise attack, they all have like temporary code names. The surprise attack ability that lets the rogue switch in without penalty is one of them. I've been starting from the passive abilities, so I have like a space in my code for all of them, because most of them, all that you're doing is checking that they're there. So all of the ones I've planned out on that table are in, they exist as nodes in my game, but it's the code that needs to reference them that matters. So not all of those are implemented, but I've been working on them, and for example, the surprise attack one needed the switch mechanic to be implemented for it to make sense. Oh, as far as passive abilities though, I have one more that the rogue has here, which I came up with for the witch, which is sort of like if you use a magic spell. So this fireball spell has the magic tag that says a magic spell was cast. There's a chance, I think it's 50%, so it might not happen, that you summon a minion when you use fire. Not that time. Okay, let's keep going this turn, and maybe it'll happen the next time. I'll skip ahead. There we go. Yeah, so I think it's the snake. There was also an imp, which didn't show up, but it's also, I don't have an animation for it. It was just like a temporary blinking ball, if it were that one. So that not all the minions that are associated with abilities are implemented either. But you can see there, I used the fireball, and the fireball use triggered a minion being summoned. So my idea was that the witch is like casting magic spells, and then creatures that it can later sacrifice for another ability are being summoned in. I've got a couple other abilities to show off, so and some that I can't easily show off that are partly implemented. So I have one for the witch where it's calling it flammable, where they take double damage from burning, but they might spread, which that part is implemented, and then they might spread the fire to other enemies, which is not yet implemented. I'm not sure whether I want it to maybe have a risk of spreading it to your own party members as well. So it has some potential upside, but is mostly downside. But I've been working through abilities in a way that completes enemies that I already have in the game. So the cleric, but these party members are not like classes, they're just test dummies really. So the healer doesn't really correspond to the cleric I have in the game, but I throw whatever test abilities I want. So I have eye drops that cures blindness, and I'm not going to get blindness right now, but it just stops it. Antidote stops poison. And right now, poison has been reworked into being like a point system. So you can stack points of poison, and then that translates to how much damage that you take every turn. So all antidote does is that if your points of poison are positive, it sets it to 0. Yeah. But what blessing does is like a regen effect. So it actually subtracts points of poison and can make them positive. And if you have negative poison, you actually heal over turn, because I realized that healing over time and taking damage over time are just opposite sides of the same coin. So like regen will be opposite. You can't be poisoned and regen health at the same time. They would just cancel out. So there'll be things like blessing can only go up to a certain amount, like you can't heal your entire health bar every turn. But if you're poisoned, it'll also just counteract some of the poison until it gets to that maximum. So let's say I apply this and well, they're just gonna summon. Their AI isn't finished, but basically if I took damage, we would all regen every turn, because that, you saw the 3 arrows there. It applied to everybody. What other ones do I have? So yeah, eye drops to heal, blessing, eye drops to cure blindness, the blessing, it's like a regen effect, and the antidote could all be like cleric or medic abilities. I already mentioned I had a couple of them for the witch already. The soldier that's in the game has an ability to buff its own defense, and also an ability to take like a defensive stance to have a greater increase of defense for lower speed. Actually, I'll show that one. I have a just called defensive stance. So if I put that in, then I got 2 arrows of a defense buff, 2 levels of defense buff, and 1 decrease of speed. I also put in another ability for like a reckless kind of charge attack for maybe a warrior that instead decreases defense for a big boost in attack. And I have a couple of abilities implemented that summon different kinds of minions, but they're not all implemented because the minions aren't implemented. So actually, I might be able to keep going with this. Let me do defensive stance a couple of times. I also changed it so that when you can't cast a spell, and I think the condition here is that if you don't have any agility to sacrifice, it won't work. So now I can just display custom messages for like when it checks whether you can cast an ability. It also returns a reason. So right there, cannot sacrifice agility any further. That flashed kind of fast on the screen, but I now have it set up better. I reworked the skill code to make it so that I can always report back why an ability can't be cast, and there could be several reasons depending on it. So yeah, I think that's pretty decent work on the abilities. The main thing was the mechanic to switch out your party members. That was the number one, but the plans that I've made over the past few weeks are starting to get implemented more, and yeah, I'm glad I had more of a mechanic to show this week. So thank you for watching. See you next time. And I know I was a little late this week. I think I'm moving towards doing it every 2 weeks. So I would have done it on Monday this week, but 2 weeks per devlog has been working out a little better than trying to hit every week. So more than likely, I'll be posting again the Monday after next. Thank you for watching.